thank you all so much for joining us. We are really very excited to have Kate de Medeiros and Suzanne Kunkel here today with us to learn more about the AgeSmart Inventory that they have developed. This is a big honor for us at Changing the Narrative. We are hosting this event today with them. It's going to really kind of spotlight them, and they'll be sharing everything. And we're also going to have you all go into breakout groups at one point to discuss further about the AgeSmart Inventory. But to tell you a bit about Changing the Narrative, if you're new to the work that we do, Changing the Narrative earlier this year became a campaign of the Next 50 initiative. We actually were originally developed and founded by Janine Vanderberg back in 2018. And everything we do at Changing the Narrative is focused on raising awareness about ageism, what it looks like, and how to understand how it's showing up in your life, how it's influencing your choices and what you believe about yourself and others, all rooted in age. We do that through many different innovative and creative campaigns. And we have lots of great resources on our website for free that you can download. And we have different focuses on ageism in the workplace, ageism in healthcare, intergenerational toolkit, where you can, have conversations with others of different ages about age, and a birthday card campaign and talking about humor and birthday cards, but just all kinds of resources. So I definitely would love for you to all check out our website. If you're not on our email list, join our email list and just be part of what we do, because we always offer different free webinars like this one today and all kinds of things. So to give you a little bit about myself, I'm Chris Gierkin. I'm a co-director at Changing the Narrative. I've been here for a bit over 4 years doing this work, and I'm very passionate about aging issues and understanding how ageism is impacting our quality of life. And before I worked for Changing the Narrative, I worked for hospice. So I'm also a big advocate for end of life awareness and grief and loss, and just understanding all the things that are out there that we don't necessarily talk about every day. And joining us today from Changing the Narrative also is Sarah Brindle. She's also a co-director, and she's waving, and she'll be managing the logistical side of things. Feel free to type questions as you have them in the chat, and Sarah can monitor that as we go. But it is my great pleasure to introduce to you all Kate de Medeiros and Suzanne Kunkel, and I'll have them each share a bit about who they are and their work.
Thank you, Chris and Sarah. Thank you very much for inviting Suzanne and I. My name is Kate de Medeiros. I am new to Montreal. I joined the faculty at Concordia University in August. I am a professor of sociology and anthropology there. Prior, I was at Miami University and worked closely with Suzanne as a professor of gerontology. So I am a gerontologist. I study aging from a lot of different facets, including the experiences of getting older. And Suzanne?
Hi, everyone. Delighted to be with you. And I will add my thanks to Chris and to Sarah for making this happen. We look forward to all kinds of new collaborations. So thank you. I am in a new phase of my life. For 40 years, I worked at Miami University in all kinds of capacities. I just was really fortunate to have landed in a great place where my interests were allowed to grow along with our academic programs in gerontology. So I was a university distinguished professor of gerontology, and I had been executive director of the Scripps Gerontology Center for 24 years. I'm now officially retired, but back to work half time in order to be able to pursue my passions, one of which is this very topic that we're going to be talking about today. My research had been lately focusing on social determinants of health, which is extremely important. And the more I thought about social determinants of health, of course, those determinants are deeply rooted in social characteristics of people. And age is absolutely one of the social determinants of health. We often focus on how age changes us physiologically, but ageism is absolutely a component of the social determinants of health. And I don't think we give that enough attention these days. So I'm just delighted to be with like-minded people and look forward to the conversation today.
Thank you, Kate and Suzanne, and thank you for mentioning that, Suzanne, because I completely, wholeheartedly agree about ageism needs to be part of the social determinants of health topics. So thanks for bringing that up. So just to give everyone a little lay of the land here, we're going to have Suzanne and Kate share a bit about the history and more information about the AgeSmart inventory. And we will then have you all in breakout groups where you'll have a document to work with in there and have discussions, and then we'll come back and do a debrief. And after that, we'll have questions and answers, and you all can have a really robust discussion as a whole group here and using the chat as well. So I would like to hear, all of us would love to hear from Kate and Suzanne about just the history of the AgeSmart inventory, the development and your intentions behind it, and maybe even about the factors that emerge in your analysis of the survey development. So we just hand it over to both of you and share what you've been through.
Thank you. I'll give you a little bit of a background and then I'll turn it over to my colleague Suzanne. Like all good ideas, it started as a hallway conversation about our frustration with how rampant ageism was institutionally, even where we taught. There was blatant ageism, there was, benevolent ageism, quote unquote, and it seemed difficult to have the conversation about ageist actions and ageist behaviors. So often, let's just say a fellow colleague might say, "Well, I'm old. What do you expect? I can't do technology," or that self-deprecating humor. Or we might even have a top-level administrator make a very ageist comment. And we found that when we would try to have conversations with people about that, we would get responses like, "Oh, you're just being defensive," or "Oh, you can't say anything nowadays." So Suzanne and I started really thinking about this deeply. We knew that there were a lot of scales to measure ageism. We knew about the relationships between ages, experiences, and reduced health outcomes. The work by Becca Levy, for example, but we were perplexed on how to address it in a way that was um, more than just learning what the right thing to say is or the wrong thing to say. So as we started to develop this, one of our former students who worked on this, I believe, is here, Alex Derrico Bronston. We saw him sign up. We had some students help us some graduate students do a uh, research on what were the current scales. How do other similar fields, people who worked with sexism, with racism, what were the ways that people use to address and measure those? So we spent about a year gathering this information and thinking through. And what we finally realized is that while we can measure knowledge about aging, again, what the right and wrong thing to say is, quote unquote, about ageism, we didn't feel that we were moving the needle in how people reacted because we thought missing from a lot of this was people recognizing age as an identity category we all have, and that we all make decisions based on age. And that's neither right or wrong. But how did we get people to have this consciousness then that yeah, maybe if I look at such, I make a choice based on what I think my age is, what I think other people's ages are, how I think they'll react to me. And that became tricky because, like other forms of isms, as I know most of you know, ageism is something that people may not experience until a certain point in their life. So maybe they didn't experience the other isms. It's hard to say what makes somebody, be treated in an ageist way, whether they're younger or older. So it didn't operate the same as the other isms and the other instruments we looked at. So what we worked on over the course of a few years now is how do we get to start the conversation about age judgments that we make, whether it's about people younger than us, older, whatever that means. How do we think deeply about these decisions that we make, and how might we then address some of the decisions that others make about age in a meaningful way that isn't shaming anyone or trying to get them to memorize some details about aging? Because we can do that. I teach students all the time about this topic, but how can we get people to really think where they are? And I will say that I came across this just the other day again. If you remember the feminist description, many years ago it circulated about a boy and his father are in a car accident. The father dies. The surgeon rushes in and says, "I can't operate on this boy. It's my son." And then people had to figure out who the doctor was. And very few people say it's the mother. People talk about the daddy didn't know he had. And so that's the kind of thing we were going for, is how can we start to get people to say, whoa, I'm making these choices about age, and I didn't even know it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Suzanne so you can add some more of your thoughts, Suzanne.
Absolutely. But that's a great description and certainly a glimpse into the journey that we went through. Um, and during that journey, it became really clear that the most important thing was to have a tool for conversation. And we from the beginning wanted something that would facilitate those conversations in different settings with different groups of people. It could be in a classroom, it could be a work setting, it could be a work team, it could be a membership group of some kind. So we wanted a tool that was clearly about the conversation and not about quantifying how ageist someone is. As Kate said, we know it doesn't work to shame people. It also doesn't work to have a quantification that says, well, you scored a 22, so sorry, you're ageist, but you scored only a 20, so you're not ageist. That doesn't help. As we've been able to work with various groups with this instrument, there is a tendency for people to want to say, well, what is the right answer? What is the ageist answer? What is the non-ageist answer? And as we'll see, I think in our breakout groups, that you tell us what's the ageist answer, what's the not. Some of these questions are not clearly ageist or non-ageist. There isn't a clear answer. It's about the conversation. So we've gotten so much reinforcement as this tool has evolved, as this inventory has evolved, and more groups have used it, and we've been able to be part of the conversation. We really are excited about the ways that this can help. And it really is, as Kate said, it's about making explicit the implicit ageism that every single one of us carries around. And I think that's been part of my personal realization, that I had ageism. I was ageist in ways I didn't even think about. This tool, this inventory, was designed to help recognize it. And again, no shaming, no blaming, no quantification, but just let's struggle with this together. Let's talk about it. Let's together try to move things forward. So it's been really exciting. We have during the process of development of the inventory, and as we've refined it, we have gathered some nationally representative data. So we do want to move forward with sort of understanding the ways in which context, or the ways in which age, or the ways in which gender might help shape how people respond to these questions. And we actually have seen some patterns on some questions. It's the youngest and the oldest folks who are most reporting most or seeing something as more ageist or less more ageist, and the middle groups are not, or vice versa. So we know, and we know that there's some gender patterns going on here. So we did do a factor analysis on the instrument we finally came up with. We wanted to, from all the sources and all the help from the grad students, we had a lot of questions, and we kept paring it down and narrowing it and cleaning it up. And so we did do a factor analysis, and we came up with some really interesting components of the AgeSmart inventory that we think, again, could be useful for the groups and the settings in which it could be used. So there's a whole group of questions that really get at age distancing. Like, older people should just go live by themselves, and I shouldn't have to be on a work team with an old person, things like that. And there's a section of questions that really get at claiming a non-ageist identity. I'm not ageist, other people are, but I know that all old people are just awesome. And so we think that our factor analysis that we did, which we'll share with you, it's published in an article. We're going to share everything with you guys. You may tell us to stop, but we're going to give you everything we got in case you can use it. But the factor analysis is going to be another way we're going to be able to, we think, customize this for different settings and different groups of people. So delighted to be here with you guys today, and really looking forward to what we can learn from you.
So one of the things that came through on the comments that people had written, both when they took the AgeSmart inventory and even some of the ones from today, is the issue of context. And we too feel very strongly about context, that context is important, which makes some of these questions difficult. So Suzanne, did you wanted to say something about what affects the contexts?
Um, Well, and I think this goes back to some of the other analyses that we want to do, but also some of what we've learned from similar conversations, that it really does matter. And I just did a quick review of the 60 some people who filled out the inventory prior to the meeting today, and compared it to our national results. And so you guys are much are clearly very invested in anti-ageism, and acknowledging it and understanding it and trying to do something about it. So one of the examples of that, there's the question about, I like to compliment people by telling them how much younger they look than they really are. You guys reject that entirely, and that is not the case for any of the other groups we've done this with. So you guys are just, no, you're not doing that. The other one that really struck me, because I'm very intrigued by the idea of humor about anything, but humor about aging. You guys reject the idea that it's okay to joke about someone getting older. Some of the conversations we've had in the past are about, can you joke about it with your age peers, like the in-group, out-group humor, but in general. And I certainly learned a very clear message from Kate about this. It's not okay. If the punchline is, haha, you're old and it's bad to be old, then it's ageist. So, but I do think there's an interesting in-group component to this. But you guys are, again, on board with, no, that's not okay. One of, well, so I have a few more. So that's one example of the context of this group of people very invested in changing the narrative. You guys are thinking about this in different ways than the general public, I would say. So that's very interesting. And again, as we seek to help organizations customize this, you might decide to focus on some questions that are a little more nuanced, or that sort of reinforce the values that you hold. So this has really helped reinforce that idea for us. But I think we're interested now in hearing what you got. Oh, go ahead.
Can I just say one thing? I know that people have said that words like elderly and senior are ageist in themselves, and I want to make just a comment on why we included those, and they are in quotation marks, and that's because I know personally I confront this issue all the time when I'll say to someone, don't use the word elderly, and they'll say, why? It's respectful. It means elder, and it doesn't. And the same with senior. So we're not trying to reinforce stereotypes, but we want to open that up as a conversation, because believe me, when I get outside of my sphere of gerontology, those words are used constantly. If you open the New York Times, you look at the New Yorker, and so it's a way of teasing those apart. But we are very acutely aware that those terms are problematic. And I personally have written a lot on the topic, and I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, and I can't let this moment pass, because I always like to say elderly doesn't mean anything. It doesn't work as an adjective, and it doesn't work as a noun. If someone is elderly, what does that mean? If someone is, if we talk about a group of the elderly, who is that? And what does it mean? So it's like the ultimate othering language. It's, there's the elderly, and then there's the rest of us, or that person is now elderly. Well, what does that mean? So anyway, can't let this moment pass and take that word out of our vocabulary.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh,
One of
wow.
the
Here's an example of someone being referred to as an elderly man, and he was 58. Yeah,
questions,
exactly. And the elderly Dr. Fauci during the COVID crisis. Yes.
right. One of the questions asked mentioned that they felt that the questions on the survey inventory had kind of a national US view or perspective, and they wanted to know if there are thoughts on a global perspective. Maybe editing the inventory in some way to think of a global perspective on how it's designed, or has that been thought about yet? That was one of the questions.
We are working with a student, former student. He's finished his PhD, who's working on making it relevant in the Chinese context. So there's that, and of course, context, as we've discussed and as people have mentioned, does matter. So even with terms, so as my Austrian colleagues point out, when they look up elderly in an English dictionary, it says a polite term for an older person. So a lot of this stuff is very contextual. we don't have active plans at this point because we're still trying to shore this up, but I think it's really important in the future. Suzanne?
I was just going to say exactly the same thing. We would love to have any collaborators who are interested in taking it to the next level, and we do. Yeah, our student, that's going to be fascinating given cultural values and language issues, what this will look like when it's translated. So we'll keep you posted.
Yes. Someone shared that they like the word senior. They don't see it as ageist, and that they've thought about that for years. And to them, it's not the same as elderly and old. It's a descriptor for when you need to describe someone with life experience. So any thoughts, Kate and Suzanne, on that?
Historically, it was used for the first time it was Time magazine, and I don't remember if it was 1937 or 1939. I can get you the exact citation, but it was actually a term used to try to push Social Security through. When it was passed in 35, there was a lot of resistance. And so senior citizen was coined as a way to make retirement a very coveted, form to really get people to leave the workplace. So very interesting history as a word and how we've used it. So now it can be very pejorative, seemingly nice, but not. I think people should call themselves whatever they want. But as I like to say, I might refer to me and my friends as the girls. But if somebody calls me a girl, I'm going to be really offended.
Yes, exactly. And I will just a side note, the Reframing Aging project, which some of you may know about, that was the general finding that people do prefer the word senior to any of the other possible words, and they do see it as less pejorative. But yeah, it again, it's about the conversation.
Absolutely. Yes. Someone shared that they had a great discussion. Didn't get to all the questions, but they talked about heightening awareness in a team or organization with the tool, especially since the results are anonymous, right? So this is definitely usable out there in the world. We need succession planning to look for high potential leaders who have the something intelligence to hold on to their baby boomers, I'll quote that, while also engaging their younger team members and facilitating collaboration that engages all of their strengths. Yeah, has this been used specifically within workplaces to try to, generate conversations yet?
Not specifically, certainly in our own workplace. When Kate was still here, one of our first focus groups was with some of our colleagues, and it was really to help refine the instrument. But no, not in a specific workplace. I think that is one of our hopes. At the symposium that you and I were at, Chris, which was a lot of people who worked for United Church Homes, but this issue of workforce did come up, and one of the tables raised this as that they didn't get off the topic, the question about older people should just go ahead and retire and make room for younger people. And there was a lot of discussion about how that is very much a reality, either spoken or unspoken in the workplace. So yes, we just think we'd love this to get into the hands of people who would use it in their workplace. I have a request. I'm just quickly reading through some of the chat. I think we want to save this because this is going to help us again sort of refine it and add to the user's guide that we're developing to share with everyone. So if we can get a copy of the chat, I think I can copy it right here. But yeah, it's great comments, great conversation.
And I do want to add that, Suzanne and I have talked about this, that even, we all can find ourselves in situations where age does become relevant. So just a personal story, the other day, I've moved to Montreal, I'm learning French. My husband tells the bartender at the restaurant we're at, a younger man, "Can you believe we're doing this at our advanced age?" And I about fell off my bar stool because he's married to me, for heaven's sakes. But it was this reaction, this immediate, I want acceptance, and this sounds crazy, and it's a reality. So again, not to shame people, but then it made for an interesting conversation on our walk home. Like, why, what the need to apologize in that situation?
And I think this gets to me, one of the most insidious aspects of ageism is internalized ageism, the extent to which I unthinkingly have embraced ageist ideas. And at the Gerontological Society meetings this past week, Nancy Morrill-Howe received a society award, and she talked about her work, and she's very invested in ageism work. But she she was talking about her own internalized ageism, and she was talking about, so if I decide I don't really want to drive 60 miles to go to this event, and I'm worried about it, my eyesight isn't as good as it used to be, but she said, is it because of my sensory changes really do precipitate me not driving, or is it my fear of those changes? And I think part of internalized ageism is exactly that. We buy into the fear and the assumption so much so that we no longer can we can't make decisions separate from our own ageist assumptions about what's going on. And I think that's really one of the hardest parts of this, is what have I unthinkingly internalized and that I'm now acting on.
Yeah, that's guiding how you're living, right? And what we are seeing in our work at Changing the Narrative is that specifically is coming up a lot lately with our audiences, just the internalized ageism. What does it look like? How do I start to become more conscious of my own internalized beliefs? And then what do I do about them, right? Like, how do I change if it's so deeply rooted that it's automatic thinking? What steps can I take to change those automatic
And I
thoughts?
think Kate's example of, sort of claiming the identity of an older person in order to, I don't know, just sort of set up a connection with this young person. Like, there's just so many ways that we do this that we don't even think about.
Well, I like to say, age is a social construction of a biological process. So I notice that some people in the chat are saying, "Hey, I am getting older," and absolutely. So it's not age denial; it's just that social construction of the meaning of age is what tends to take over and leads to these, ageist behaviors, ageist and internal ageist attitudes. But yes, I don't think any of us should have to apologize for growing older, but it's what the social meaning is, what that's developed into, which is what I think we're all fighting against.
Absolutely. And someone drew attention to the phrase age is just a number, which in some ways sounds so enlightened, but age is not just a number. Age is the way society treats us based on what they think that number is. So it's very complicated and multi-layered, and conversations like this are how we get somewhere.
So people are able to share this inventory that you all have shared with us. Is that correct? Right. And are there any guidelines or any specific instructions that you have on how people use it, or
We have some working documents. So Suzanne and I are in the process of building out our webpage, AgeSmartInventory.com, to come, and we would love any of your input. If you have some, you're welcome to email us. I think that our emails are going to be shared as well, and they appear in some documents, or you can Google me. But we have a guide. What as we've stressed, we see this not as an assessment or a survey. We purposely use the word inventory as a way to reflect on the various ways we make choices depending on our contexts. So we have some guidelines for the conversation, as well as some explanation about why these particular questions. Suzanne mentioned a factor analysis, what those factors are, what those factors mean, and how we see the conversation going. And I think it's something that you may want two of these statements to use in a group as a conversation point. I don't think it's something that one has to do from start to finish, since there is no score, right? It's just it's a basis for a conversation.
And I want to thank the person who added more to the conversation about age is just a number. It is also the accumulation of the lives we've lived and everything we've accomplished. So yes, just great insights. Can't wait to read more. And yeah, thanks to all.
And we'll share a blank form too. I see people asking about that, so we can share that as well, so that you don't have to use the one you've already filled out.
Yes. Yeah. And to everyone, if people haven't seen this, Changing the Narrative will be sending a follow-up email to everybody that's registered for today, as well as the recording of today, that will cut out the breakout section. But you'll get all the links in that follow-up email to everything.
The chat, we got to share the chat. It's
Yes.
amazing. Just
Okay.
you're right. Like age doesn't matter is the same as saying I don't see color. Totally agree. Absolutely agree. Brilliant. Can't wait to read more and We'll be
Yeah.
quoting some of you and the next time we do a presentation like this.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, we will definitely save the chat. So
Thank you.
thank you so much, Kate and Suzanne, for being here today and to sharing your amazing work. We are so impressed with it and excited to see how it evolves. And we would love to be a part of anything in the work that you're going to carry on from here. So hopefully we can do like a part 2 of this, because this was wonderful and highly engaging.
Thank you.
Yes,
It's been
thank
a
you.
privilege.
It
Thank you so
has.
much.